So I was scrolling on social media, Facebook specifically, the other day, and I saw in a mum's group a post that keeps seeming to come up, which is people moving to the area that we live in, and obviously mums with children and struggling to establish themselves with a social network or friends. And probably about the fifth or sixth time I've seen a very similar post written, and it really made me think back to 13 years ago whenever I moved to Australia. And I have to admit that friendship and friends was probably one of my greatest fears. How was I going to make friends? How much was I going to miss my friends back in Ireland? And how lonely was I going to feel? And I have to say, as a mum with young children, that can often be a really nice avenue into making friends. And sometimes I do feel that perhaps for our male partners, it can be a little bit more challenging because maybe they're not heading to the school gates or the daycare quite as much as we are. So it really made me think about what are the advantages of having friends, and why as humans are we so desperate to have that connection? What is it that it brings for us? And what are the health advantages and benefits of friendship? Because the reality is, we know that the more we prioritize friendship, it would seem that the happier and healthier we seem to be. And it's not even just humans who seem to prioritize friendship. If we even think of, like, I've got 3 dogs, and definitely 2 of the dogs seem to be friendlier with each other than one of the other dogs. And we know that primates and monkeys seem to make friendships as well and seem to prioritize them. So there's obviously some other benefit than it just being fun to hang out with people. And so I've been thinking a lot about friendship and what are the health advantages, because obviously as a doctor, I want to know, are there health benefits? And it would seem that there are, because some of my patients who struggle perhaps with mental illness or addiction often do seem to have lower self-esteem and less social connections. And it's always hard to understand which came first. Is it the lack of social connections that's contributing to their mental health problems, or is it the other way around, that their mental health problems have just contributed to their friendships falling away? And I think there's probably a little bit of both. So we know that friendship seems to be something that's quite easy for children. Take 4 and 5-year-olds to a play park, and usually within 5 or 10 minutes they'll be playing happily with other children, laughing and giggling. But it seems as we get a bit older that we put our guard up a little bit more, and it all becomes a little bit more stressful and difficult to break down those barriers and become friends with people. So I wanted just to think about, like, what does it mean to have a friendship, and what are the benefits both for you and the other person, and what even is a friendship? And I was looking it up, and you look up the dictionary and you look up medical definitions, and there's all sorts of different connotations and directions that the definition seems to be taken. But the reality of a friendship in an adult seems to be that obviously it has to be voluntary. So you know that we are all not going to make friends with someone because someone tells us we're going to. And I suppose our kids are a bit like that too. And I think sometimes as adults that we can be a little bit at risk of trying to push our kids towards friendships, and yet we wouldn't want someone to do the same to us. So definitely it has to be a voluntary thing that you want to be friends with this person. And friendship has to also be reciprocal. So I think we've probably all had a relationship with a friend that hasn't felt that it's kind of 2 ways, that it's felt one person's maybe a bit more invested. So maybe somebody wants to have, 3 WhatsApp messages a year and send you a Christmas card, and the other person wants to be talking on the phone every day. And so there's a bit of a mismatch there in that friendship. I think for most friendships, it tends to be a bit of an informal thing. So usually when you're with your friends, your language is a little bit more informal and friendly, and you're hopefully a lot more relaxed than you normally are. Friendships also need to be quite stimulating. So we all know that there are people that we find really interesting and we're excited to catch up with them. And then unfortunately, there are people who their interests just don't interest us and they seem a little bit boring. And then obviously we're looking for that companionship. So we want ultimately someone to hang out with, or someone that we can pick up the phone to. And we want that person to kind of have loyalty towards us. And so what are the reasons why we want to have this? Well, in basic terms, clearly it feels pretty good to have a friendship, and it's always lovely to feel like you've got that loyalty. Like, I know recently I've ended up with a lovely, multiple different groups of friends, but lovely friends. And I know I've had a lot going on with work recently. I've had a lot of presentations and talks, and I've been sort of really, really bogged down kind of preparing, and to be honest, being quite nervous and probably knee deep in imposter syndrome. And I have to say, I've had to remind myself, one, to make an effort and stay in touch with friends, but also it's been my friends who've been the people who, when I've had a little freak out or been feeling a bit overwhelmed, it's been my friends who've definitely got me back on track, calmed me down, and their absolute sort of love and loyalty for me is definitely one of those things that gives me that sense of better self-esteem and value, because they believe in me, and therefore it helps me to have a little bit more self-belief as well. So I think the great thing about having friends is that, you know, they give you sympathy, they give you affection, hopefully they give you encouragement, and they're people that you can trust. And the other lovely thing about friends is, yes, it's nice to have a coffee or a lunch date with someone, but the reality is that they can be really practically supportive as well. So I know, you know, in our group of friends, we've had, some of our friends have recently had separations and been moving house and all sorts of things, and the friends sort of stepped up in a very practical way. And I know whenever I had some surgery last year, again, my friends were very generous at dropping off dinners and helping pick up my children from school and things. So there's all that very practical, supportive friends. And I think the other thing that we always have to remember with friendship is, like, it is an investment. So I always think of all relationships a little bit like a bank account, and you can't take out of the bank account before you've put money into the bank account. You can't get it overdrawn right at the beginning. And I think we always have to remember that, you know, if we want loyalty, we have to give loyalty. And if we want someone's time, we have to give time. So the way I explain it to my children is literally like a piggy bank, and you've got to put some deposits in the piggy bank. So in all friendships, the deposits might take a different amount of time. You might need to work on a friendship for years before you really feel very comfortable to take money back out of the piggy bank, as it were. But I think the reality is, if you just keep that in mind, that I find that friendships tend to go awry whenever someone is trying to do too much taking, or on the other hand, someone's doing too much giving, and then they end up a bit frustrated and resentful. So I wanted to really understand what the health advantages might be of friendship, and if there were any, in fact. So I took a really deep dive into the literature, and my goodness me, I seem to be reading for hours and hours, and I printed off endless things to read in between appointments and things. And there's definitely lots and lots of research, both looking at sort of animal studies and then lots of human studies. And they range from studies that looked at the psychology of friendship, even right down to the economics of friendship, looking at with whether your friends really did influence your success. Do your friends influence your weight, your health, your well-being? And quite frankly, it seems like they really do. So actually, if you've got a good and supportive group of friends, it seems that you have a lower BMI or a lower weight, or more likely to be a healthier weight. You're more likely to be healthy. But obviously that depends on the group of friends you're surrounding yourself with. But I thought that was quite interesting as well. People are talking a lot about the word well-being at the minute. And I always think that's a really funny word to define, because it seems like friendship, loneliness, and well-being all seem to fall into the same sentence quite frequently. And I wondered whether there really was a connection between well-being and friendship. And interestingly, it seems like there is. But if we think about what we mean by well-being, again, deep dive into the definition, seem to be tons of them. Lots of them were quite waffly, to be honest. But it seemed like well-being is a sense of physical and mental health or wellness. and a sense of satisfaction and engagement in life, and also that people have a meaning to life. So I think they would say that if someone feels like life's pointless, what's the point? I don't really understand why we're even here. It would seem that you probably don't have a great sense of well-being. And then whenever you looked at what very clever scientists had decided were the pillars of well-being, it seemed that a lot of them were all centered around positive relationships, engagement with life as well. And obviously, if you've got positive relationships and friends, you're usually a bit more likely to be engaged in life. So you're probably more likely to go on that hike or sign up for that 5K or go to a charity event or sign up to go to a formal ball or something like that if you've got a group of friends that you're going to do it with. And I think the other thing that was really important for well-being was that you had to be experiencing positive emotions. And the reality is, I don't know about you, but certainly with my friends, sometimes the topics are really hard and heavy, and sometimes there's sadness in the room. But I have to say, a lot of the time, even when there's tears, there's usually a lot of laughter and a lot of fun. And even just we'll often share little jokes in our WhatsApp group, or I have to admit that we're definitely of that age that we're sharing little memes and videos with each other about perimenopause and menopause and our impending dementia and memory loss. So we always have quite a few laughs about that. And I think the other thing about wellness seems to be around accomplishments. So whether you are striving towards a goal in life, having accomplishments, and then having someone who is there to, I suppose, acknowledge your accomplishments and celebrate with you. I think the flip side of the coin, which I'm not going to shy away from, is that there's no doubt there's some friendships that can be quite stressful. And even good friendships can go through rocky periods where perhaps one person is just not seeing eye to eye with the other person, or one person has different expectations of the relationship than the other. And I think that I think it's important that we acknowledge that. I'm not saying that all friendships are rainbows and lollipops, and there's definitely times that friendships just end for different reasons, or that friendships have to definitely navigate a storm. With that all said and done, I think the thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about was why it might be beneficial for you to make a bit more of an effort with friends. So again, we know our teenagers. We've got teenagers at home. They seem to be pretty obsessed with their friends. They're on Snapchat and they're sending photos of themselves, I don't know, sticking their tongue out and all sorts of things. And that seems to be a lot of repeated interactions and touch points. And I know that even in our house recently, people have been a bit more reluctant even to go on holiday because they're going to miss their friends, etc. So we know when people are in their teenage years, friends become a really, really important part of life. But then we sort of partner off, and often our partner often becomes our really big focus, and it can be super easy for us to be so busy with work and partners and kids that actually it's really, really hard to find time for friends. So I think I wanted to chat today about why I think it's really worth your effort, because I think it's a lovely thing to do, but also the health benefits that you might receive. Basically, we know that whenever you're with friends, you are much more likely to be releasing a neurotransmitter in your brain called oxytocin. And oxytocin is a neurotransmitter that is released a lot at childbirth, when you're breastfeeding, and it's all supposed to have been about connection and connecting with your baby. But the reality is that what we now know is that we actually release this hormone a lot whenever we're having positive interactions with friends or family or acquaintances, but it's definitely something that we release. And it seems to be that we release substantial quantities when we're in the company of people that we're very relaxed and familiar with and we're having fun with. And so what are the advantages of releasing all this oxytocin? Well, basically, it seems to not only be good about bonding with a child, but it's really good about bonding with other adults. And it also increases empathy and generosity and trust. And we know in any society, the more empathy you have, tend to be the more successful that society is, because people are much more understanding and show a lot more kindness. And obviously that's a little bit looser, but there's really helpful physical benefits as well. So we know that oxytocin actually mediates the amount of cortisol in your body. And lots of people have heard of cortisol. We all know it as the stress hormone. So if you're being chased by a tiger, you get a big surge of cortisol. But you also get a big surge of cortisol when you're really stressed at work, or when you're about to step on stage and give a presentation, or if you're really, really worried constantly about your relationship or money, you'll just be pumping out cortisol all the time. And the problem with that is that not only is it absolutely exhausting for your body, because quite frankly, you can't keep running from the tiger all the time, but the reality is that it also makes things like your blood pressure increase. And so we know that high blood pressure is associated with things like heart disease, kidney disease, heart attacks, strokes, and all those things that we're trying to avoid. So we know that actually, if you're releasing more of that good hormone, oxytocin, then it means that you're going to be mediating the effects of the cortisol in your body. Another study back in 2017 with medical students, interestingly, so they asked two groups of medical students to do a certain exercise program. And one group, they did the exercise program on their own. And then the other group, they did it as a group together. And it was a once a week exercise class. And then they followed them for quite a few months to see the health benefits. And while both groups definitely benefited from a fitness or physical fitness point of view, the group who were working together and exercising together actually showed markedly improved stress levels and improved mental health. The group who were exercising on their own didn't show as helpful benefits at all on those two categories. Now, obviously, that's only one study, but anecdotally, it definitely makes sense. And when they chatted with the medical students afterwards, what was really interesting was that the group who exercised alone, although they actually said that they did get into a routine of following through with the exercise plan, the group who they spoke to who were exercising together said they looked forward to their exercise class, that they often lingered afterwards to chat with people and interact, and it became kind of a highlight of their week. So I just think it's really interesting that you can be doing the exact same physical activity, but when you do it with other people, it seems to have even more health benefits. If I think back to those people who've been asking on those Facebook groups about how they might make friends, I know as a doctor, I often do suggest that people look up, like there's lots of hiking or walking clubs here where we live. There's lots of exercise in Australia generally is massive. There's gyms, Pilates studios, yoga studios. And I've ended up seeing so many patients and friends who, to be honest, have met someone at their yoga class. And the next thing they're going off on a yoga retreat to Bali. And, you know, it is amazing how these friendships can evolve. So sometimes a group activity is a really good opportunity. I have another patient recently telling me that she'd had a lifelong ambition to do pottery. And she had recently joined a pottery group here on the Central Coast. And she was so excited because she'd actually found it really challenging to break in and find a group of friends because she doesn't have any children at home. And she was really just going to work, coming home, going to the gym by herself, not meeting anyone. But this pottery class has been a really, really great way of making friends. And I know personally, I'm not a very good singer, but I know for quite a while I went to a community choir, and that was a very joyful experience because singing does tend to be fun in a group, but it was also another great way to make new friends and connections and just have some sort of really good fun together. I'd like to also say some other interesting things that I find amazing. So I'm very interested in these blue zones in the world. And for anyone who doesn't know what those are, they're these very interesting areas of the world where you get these pockets of people who seem to live very, very long lives, but very, very long and healthy lives. So they seem to live into their 80s, 90s and beyond, but are functioning at a very high level, still very engaged in their community. And so scientists have called them blue zones. And whenever they looked at one of these blue zones in Greece, in a remote island in Greece, they were trying to understand why these people live for so long. And so all sorts of scientists have been looking into it. Is it to do with their diet? Is it to do with a certain type of sweet potato they eat, or a certain type of vegetable they have in their diet? Or is it the olive oil? Or is it all of the things? But one of the things that they did come up with is that people on this island, social interaction is massively important. And so, for example, in the village, they have a games area, and it's very, very traditional that in the evenings, lots of people will sit down and play various board games and chess games, or sit together chatting. And that these older members of the community are absolutely and very much engaged in this the whole way through their life. So I think it just goes to show you that we might all be trying to look for that golden bullet that's going to make us look and feel healthier for longer. But actually the answer might literally just be at the end of the telephone. And it might just be about calling a friend and making that connection to meet in person. I think the other thing that's really interesting is people feel like in ways we're more connected than ever. But are we? Because really, if you are just liking someone's Facebook post or scrolling through, and you're just sitting on your lounge every evening watching TV and looking on your phone, are we really that connected? I have to say, I'm definitely guilty of doing exactly that. But the reality is, I don't know that I come off from that feeling particularly great. But I do know that when I go out and meet my friends, which is sometimes for a walk, or sometimes we go out for dinner, or we go for a movie, I always come home so glad that I've, made the effort and got ready and gone out. So I think one of the other things that is really, really important is that if we look at dementia, we know that if you are socially isolated or lonely, you're about 50% more likely to have dementia. And the World Health Organization have really highlighted loneliness as one of the major epidemics that they see becoming a big problem. And I found it unbelievable when I started looking at some of the statistics around the impact of loneliness on our physical health and mortality or risk of dying. And I think this is going to blow your mind, but basically, if someone is lonely, they are about on par with someone who's smoking 15 cigarettes a day, or someone who's completely inactive, or someone with morbid obesity in terms of their mortality rate. So I think, just let that sink in, because I think in this world that we live in today, it's just so easy to get really caught up with work and busyness and going to the gym and doing the shopping and coming home and doing chores and then flopping on that sofa, and you think you've ticked all the boxes. You're taking vitamins, you're looking after your body, you're exercising, your weight's great. Maybe you don't smoke, you don't vape, you don't drink very much. That's all great. But actually, if you're completely socially isolated, it's literally like you're not doing some of those things. And I think that just blows my mind. And it's something that we do not completely understand why it's the case. Another frequent fact that is often bandied around is that marriage is better for the health of men, but not so good for the health of women. So interestingly, friendship may be more protective than marriage and family for everyone. So I would encourage everyone to make that effort with friends and make friends, but also try and maintain friendships. And that can be challenging as well. So my tips for trying to maintain friends, and I'm certainly not an expert at this, I just do try my best, but would be, first of all, listen properly. And I'm a chatterbox, so sometimes I have to remind myself that I need to actively listen And that means that I'm not just waiting for a pause in the conversation so that I can jump in with my 10 cents worth, but I'm actually really listening to what my friends are talking about. And I'm making it really obvious to them that I'm listening and I'm hearing what they're saying, and I'm reflecting back on what they're saying. So I think that's really important. We all know how lovely it is to feel like someone has heard you, and what you're going through is really important, whether it's positive or negative. We all want someone to listen. So that's my first tip. My second thing is about keeping your word. So the beautiful thing about friendships is that people will often share their very intimate secrets and details about their health or their lack of health, or their partner's lack of health, or relationship problems that they might be having, or an issue or stress they're having with one of their children or a family member. And I think it's so lovely when someone feels they can unburden themselves and they can ask for a bit of advice. But I think it's really important that we're trustworthy and we don't take that piece of information and either weaponize it or go and share it whenever you know that it's not something that they want out there in public. The other thing is to think about, what is the love language of that friend? You know, make an effort. If you know that that person is someone who really appreciates maybe receiving a card, or words are really important to them, then maybe you write them a little note or send them a lovely email. If you know someone is very practical, or they love maybe going for walks, or that you know they've had a rough time recently and that you can help them, think about what it is that you can do to express that you see them and you see what's important for them, because everyone has a different language of love and how they feel appreciated and how they give their own love. The other thing is really to be supportive. And sometimes that can feel really hard. Life's really busy. You've got work, you come home, you're running around with kids or grandkids, delivering them left, right and centre. And all you want to do in the evening is come in and relax. And maybe the last thing that you want to do is to chat on the phone or to show up for an event that someone has organised or a party. But, you know, it's just trying to dig deep and make that effort for that person, because not only will that person just be so appreciative of that support, but as I've said to you, you will reap the rewards of this friendship in dividends as well. And lastly, honesty. I will counter this by saying it's not about being brutal to someone or telling them that, you know, you hate their clothes or whatever, but, you know, just maybe being honest with someone and giving them a gentle probe if you feel like they're going off track or you're worried about them. It's being honest and talking to that person and maybe challenging them or saying that you'll help them. So, you know, if someone's really struggling with sleep, or they're struggling with their kids, or maybe they're struggling by drinking a bit too much, you know, maybe you might offer to go along with them to an appointment with a health professional. You might offer to go walking with them, or maybe you might offer to go on a healthy eating or a healthy or a wellness journey with them, just so that they feel like they've got someone who can support them along the way. So hopefully you can see why I'm so passionate about friendships and connection, and you can see that these sometimes wonderful, sometimes tricky relationships that can be full of love and intimate conversations and loyalty, and can be so building of self-esteem and self-worth, and can just be full of trust, can also bring you so many physical benefits, like being a healthier weight, having lower blood pressure, having less chance of dementia, and heaps of other physical benefits of friendship. Hopefully today you'll decide that it is worth making that extra effort. And I know that it does take time and energy to do so. And I know that you have to try and find friends who match your expectations of friendship, and you'll go in through different chapters of your life when friendships will be very intense, and at other times they'll sort of wax and wane a little bit. But I hope that you will make the decision to see this as a really important part of your wellness journey and the ability to impact someone else's wellness journey. And you will see that having really, really good friends is such an investment, not only in your health now, but in the future as well. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare, or other professional advice. Information is provided for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you have any health concerns, always consult your doctor.